The sterile scent of disinfectant hung heavy in the air, a stark contrast to the pallor of death settling upon Arthur's face. He lay still, his breath shallow, his eyes glazed over with the knowledge that his time was near. John sat beside his friend, his heart heavy with a grief he couldn't articulate. They had been friends since childhood, sharing secrets, dreams, and a bond unbreakable by time or distance. "John," Arthur rasped, his voice a mere whisper. John leaned closer, his ear almost touching Arthur's parched lips to catch the fading words. I have something to tell you," Arthur's voice cracked, a tremor running through his frail frame. "Something I should have confessed a long time ago." John's brow furrowed with concern. "What is it, old friend?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. "You know you can tell me anything." Arthur's eyes, once filled with life and laughter, now held a haunted look. The weight of his unspoken secret etched on his face. He took a shuddering breath, a grimace twisting his features, as if each inhale brought a fresh wave of pain. "It's about Emily," Arthur choked out, his voice barely audible. "Emily!" John's heart stuttered in his chest. Emily, his beloved companion who had vanished without a trace 5 years ago. A cold dread began to seep into his veins, turning his blood to ice. "What about Emily?" he asked, his voice strained, his gaze fixed on Arthur's face, searching for answers in the dying man's eyes. We were having an affair," Arthur confessed, his voice barely a whisper, each word a struggle against his failing body. John reeled back as if struck, his mind struggling to grasp the enormity of the confession. Emily and Arthur? An affair? It seemed unfathomable, impossible, yet here it was, spilling from Arthur's lips in the twilight of his life. "It started innocently," Arthur continued, his voice gaining a sliver of strength as if fueled by the need to unburden his soul. "She wasn't happy, John. She confided in me, and one thing led to another." He trailed off, his gaze falling to his hands, his fingers picking at the worn bedsheet. John sat there, stunned, his world tilting on its axis. His best friend, his confidant, had betrayed him in the most profound way. The betrayal was a bitter pill to swallow, made even more unbearable by the fact that it came from a man on his deathbed. "How could you?" John breathed, his voice a mix of anger and pain. I know, Arthur moaned, his eyes filled with remorse. "I betrayed your trust, John. I was selfish, blinded by my own desires. I never meant to hurt you." His words were a torrent now, rushing out as if a dam had broken within him, releasing years of pent-up guilt and shame. "But it gets worse, John," Arthur said, his voice dropping to a chilling whisper, his hand reaching out to grip John's arm in a desperate plea. "It gets much worse." John looked down at Arthur's trembling hand, his own hand balling into a fist. He already felt like he'd been punched in the gut, yet he knew with a sinking feeling that the worst was yet to come. "She wanted to end it," Arthur continued, his voice strained, his eyes filled with a chilling desperation. "She said she was going to tell you everything. I panicked. I couldn't let her ruin everything." He paused, his chest heaving as he struggled for breath. The silence in the room stretched, thick with unspoken horror. "What did you do, Arthur?" John asked, his voice a monotone, devoid of emotion, his mind refusing to accept what he knew was coming. Arthur's grip on his arm tightened, his eyes pleading for understanding, for forgiveness that John knew he couldn't give. I killed her, John," Arthur confessed, his voice a strangled whisper. "I killed Emily." The words hit John like a physical blow, sending a shockwave through his body. He stared at Arthur, his mind reeling, the world around him dissolving into a dizzying blur. "I didn't mean to, not really," Arthur continued, his voice cracking with the effort of confession. "It was an accident, a struggle. It happened so fast." He squeezed his eyes shut, tears leaking from beneath his eyelids. "I buried her body in the woods near our old fishing spot. No one would ever think to look there." John remained silent, his gaze fixed on Arthur's face, his mind a maelstrom of emotions. Disbelief warred with anger, grief with a chilling emptiness. The confession hung in the air between them, a poisonous vapor suffocating them both. "All these years," John finally whispered, his voice hoarse, "you let me believe she left me." "I'm so sorry, John," Arthur sobbed, his body racked with the effort. "I never wanted to hurt you. I lived with this guilt every single day, the weight of it crushing me." His voice was a low moan filled with pain and regret. "I know it's no excuse, but I loved her, John. In my own twisted way, I loved her." John could only stare at him, the enormity of Arthur's confession washing over him in sickening waves. His best friend, the man he had trusted with his life, had not only betrayed him, but had taken the life of the woman he loved. The knowledge was a physical pain, a leaden weight settling in his stomach, making it hard to breathe. I need some air," John choked out, pushing himself to his feet. He stumbled towards the window, his legs feeling like lead. He threw open the window, gasping for breath, trying to clear the suffocating weight of Arthur's confession from his lungs. The cool night air did little to ease the turmoil raging within him. He looked out at the city lights, each twinkling light a reminder of the life that Emily had been denied, the life they could have had together. Anger, raw and consuming, surged through him, directed not just at Arthur but at himself for his blindness, for not seeing the truth that had been hidden in plain sight. He thought of Emily's laughter, her bright smile, her infectious joy for life. And then he saw her face, contorted in fear, her eyes wide with terror in the last moments of her life. The image conjured by his guilt-ridden imagination was seared into his mind, a fresh wound that refused to heal. Section 6, Internal Conflict, Loyalty versus Justice. John stood at the window for what felt like an eternity, battling the storm of emotions raging within him. The need for justice, for revenge, warred with years of friendship, of loyalty to the man lying in the hospital bed. Could he turn in his dying friend, his confidant, and betray the bond they had shared since childhood? But what about Emily? Didn't she deserve justice? Didn't she deserve to have her story told? To have her murderer held accountable for his actions? The thought of Arthur escaping justice, of him dying with his secret buried with him, filled John with a cold fury. He thought of the man Arthur had been, kind, loyal, always there for him. But that man was gone, replaced by a stranger capable of unspeakable cruelty. The Arthur he knew, the friend he cherished, was already dead, a casualty of his own actions. As he stood there, torn between loyalty and justice, a terrifying thought struck him. If Arthur could kill Emily and hide it for so long, what else was he capable of? What other secrets lay hidden beneath the surface of their friendship? Section 7. The Last Breath. Silence falls. Turning from the window, John returned to Arthur's bedside. His friend lay still, his chest no longer rising and falling with each laboured breath. His eyes were closed, his face now serene, the torment that had twisted his features in life finally erased in death. John reached out, his hand hovering over Arthur's. He wanted to shake him awake, to demand answers, to scream at him for what he had done. But the fight had gone out of him. Arthur had taken his last breath, carrying his secrets and his guilt to the grave. The silence in the room was deafening, broken only by the steady beep of the heart monitor, now a flat line, a stark reminder of the finality of death. Arthur was gone, leaving John alone with a truth more devastating than he could have ever imagined. The weight of Arthur's confession pressed down on him, threatening to crush him beneath its weight. He felt like a man standing on the edge of an abyss, the ground crumbling beneath his feet. He had lost his best friend, the woman he loved, and his faith in the world. Section 8. The Weight of the Secret, a Moral Dilemma. The weight of Arthur's secret settled upon John, a heavy cloak of despair and uncertainty. The confession, whispered in a hospital room, had irrevocably altered the landscape of his life, leaving him stranded in a desolate wasteland of grief and moral ambiguity. He could tell the authorities, of course. He could reveal Arthur's crime, bring Emily's killer to justice, even in death. The thought offered a flicker of satisfaction, a momentary balm to the burning rage and sorrow consuming him. But at what cost? Arthur was gone, beyond the reach of earthly judgment. Revealing his crime would only serve to tarnish his memory, to cast a long shadow over their shared past. It wouldn't bring Emily back. It wouldn't erase the pain of her loss or the betrayal that cut him to his core. Yet the thought of remaining silent, of carrying Arthur's secret to his own grave, felt like a betrayal of Emily's memory. She deserved justice. She deserved to have her story told, to have her voice heard, even in death. Section 9. Seeking justice or protecting a friend. A difficult path. Days turned into weeks, each sunrise a painful reminder of his loss, of the impossible choice he faced. The world continued to spin, oblivious to the turmoil raging within him, the burden of Arthur's confession a constant weight on his soul. He visited Emily's grave, the cold marble a stark reminder of her absence. He sat there for hours, speaking to her in hushed tones, seeking solace in the shared silence, the unfulfilled promises whispered to the wind. He thought of Arthur, of their friendship, of the laughter and memories they had shared. Could he betray that bond even in death? Was it possible to honor his friend while seeking justice for the woman they both loved? In the end, the decision came down to a simple, yet profound truth. Emily deserved justice. Arthur had taken her life, and he would face the consequences of his actions, even if those consequences were exacted through John's revelation. With a heavy heart, John picked up the phone, the dial tone a harbinger of the storm to come. He knew that in seeking justice for Emily, he would be opening a Pandora's box of pain and scrutiny, but some truths, he realized, were too heavy to bear alone.